Close your eyes for just a second. Try to picture a bright red apple floating in an empty white room. Do you see it? Good. Now, what did that cost you? You probably think it was free. You probably think your imagination is just a magical space where things happen without consequences. It is not. To hold that red apple in your mind, millions of tiny electrical signals just fired across your brain. Atoms exchanged electrons. Molecules of sugar were burned. You just generated a tiny, microscopic amount of heat. You are a machine. A wet, squishy, unbelievably complicated machine. And that machine runs on the exact same laws of physics as a steam engine. Tonight, when you go to sleep, that machine is going to put on a bizarre, hallucinated movie for you. A giant talking bird flying a spaceship made of cheese. Your third-grade math teacher riding a bicycle underwater. You will call it a dream. You might think it reveals your deepest hidden desires. You might think the universe is sending you a message. You might think it means something. I hate to break it to you, but it does not. Your dreams are neural trash. They are the exhaust fumes of a biological engine trying not to melt down. Because useless data burns, and there is a real disease that proves it. A disease where the exhaust pipe is sealed shut, and the brain literally cooks itself from the inside. Let me show you what is really happening inside your skull every night. Before we break reality and look at the actual physics of your mind, let us step back for a moment. Let us talk about steam engines. Not because this is a history lesson. I do not care when they were invented or who built them. What I care about is what they taught us about the universe. Here is what a steam engine does. You burn coal. The coal heats water. The water turns to steam. The steam pushes a piston. The piston turns a wheel. That is it. That is all an engine is. A device that turns heat into motion. Simple, right? Now here is the question that changed everything. Can you turn all the heat into motion? Think about it. You have a fire. You have water. You have a piston. Can you design an engine so perfect, so brilliantly engineered, that every single joule of heat from that coal gets converted into useful work? Zero waste? The answer is no. And this is not an engineering problem. This is not about building better pistons or finding hotter fuels. This is a law of the universe, as absolute and unbreakable as gravity. Every engine that has ever existed or will ever exist, must have an exhaust pipe. Some of the heat must escape. Some of the energy must be dumped into the environment as useless waste heat. There is no way around it. Not with better technology. Not with infinite money. Not with alien engineering from a civilization a billion years ahead of us. The exhaust pipe is mandatory. Now, to understand why, you need to understand what heat actually is. Because heat is not some mysterious, invisible fluid. Heat is atoms moving. Right now, the air around you is filled with tiny molecules. Nitrogen, oxygen, a bit of carbon dioxide. And they are all jiggling, bouncing off each other, slamming into the walls around you at speeds of about 500 meters per second. That is roughly 1,100 miles per hour. When something is hot, the atoms jiggle faster. When it is cold, they jiggle slower. That is all temperature is, the average speed of atoms jiggling. Now here's the key. When you heat one side of an engine, you are creating organization. Fast atoms on one side, slower atoms on the other. That difference, that organization, is what lets you extract useful work. But the moment you start extracting work, the fast atoms slow down, the slow atoms speed up. Everything starts mixing, the organization disappears, and it only goes one direction. Order turns into disorder. Hot mixes with cold. Organized becomes disorganized, and you cannot reverse it for free. This is the second law of thermodynamics, and it is one of the most important sentences in all of physics. Think of it like a brand new deck of cards. You just bought it from the store. The cards are perfectly organized, aces on top, then twos, then threes, all the way down, sorted by suit. Now shuffle that deck. Once, twice, 10 times. What happened? The order is gone. The cards are mixed up. Here is the question. Can you shuffle that mixed-up deck and get back to the original perfect order? Technically, yes. It is possible. But the odds are about 1 in 8 times 10 to the 67th. That is a 1 followed by 68 zeros. You would have a better chance of winning the lottery every day for the rest of your life, simultaneously. So the only practical way to get those cards back in order is to sort them yourself, manually, card by card. And that takes work, it takes energy, and that energy produces heat, waste heat. You organized the cards, but you made the universe around you more disordered in the process. Your body burned calories. Your muscles generated heat. The room got slightly warmer. You tidied the deck, but you messed up the universe. That is the second law. You can create order in one place, but only by creating more disorder somewhere else. The total disorder of the universe always goes up. Always. And that exhaust pipe? That is the universe's way of enforcing this law. It is the price tag on every transformation, the mandatory tax on every engine. Remember this, because that exhaust pipe is about to show up inside your skull. Now here is where it gets personal. Your brain is sitting inside your skull right now. About 1.4 kilograms, roughly 3 pounds, of soft, wrinkled tissue. And it is made of atoms. The exact same atoms that are in those steam engines. Carbon, oxygen, hydrogen, nitrogen. A bit of iron, some calcium, traces of zinc. There is nothing magical about these atoms. They are not special brain atoms. They are the same atoms you would find in a rock, in a puddle of water, in a lump of coal. And here is the thing that changes everything. Your brain does not get a special exemption from the laws of the universe. The second law does not have a footnote that says, except for biological systems. It does not care that you are alive. It does not care that you are conscious. It does not care that you have feelings and memories and a favorite song. Your brain is a physical engine. And like every engine, it must obey the second law. So let us look at what this engine actually does. Right now, as you are watching this, your brain is absorbing an absurd amount of data. The exact brightness of your screen, the ambient temperature of the room, the faint hum of electronics, the pressure of your body against whatever you are sitting on, the position of your fingers, the rhythm of your breathing. You are not choosing to record any of this. Your brain does it automatically, all of it, constantly. About 11 million bits of sensory data per second flooding in through your eyes, ears, skin, nose, and tongue. 11 million bits, every single second. And every piece of data that gets stored costs something physical. Because a memory is not an abstract thing floating in some digital cloud. A memory is a physical structure. When you form a memory, atoms in your brain are physically rearranged. Proteins fold into new shapes. Chemical bridges called synapses are strengthened between neurons. New dendritic spines, tiny little bumps on the surface of brain cells, literally grow. This process consumes sugar and oxygen. Your brain burns through about 5.6 milligrams of glucose per minute. roughly 8 grams per day, or about 0.28 ounces, just to maintain its existing connections. To form new memories, it burns even more. But here is the problem. Go back to our deck of cards. A deck has 52 cards, a fixed number of positions. You can arrange them in a staggering number of combinations, but you cannot add more cards. The space is limited. Your brain has about 86 billion neurons with roughly 100 trillion synaptic connections. That sounds like an enormous number, and it is, but it is not infinite. With 11 million bits per second pouring in, hour after hour, day after day, your brain would fill up. The deck runs out of room. So what does it do? It must forget. It must erase data. The useless stuff, the exact pattern of cracks on the sidewalk you walked past yesterday, the number of red cars you saw on the highway, the face of the stranger who held the door for you at the coffee shop. All of that has to go. And here is the reframe that changes everything. Erasing information is not a software command. It is not like pressing delete on a computer. Erasing information is a physical process. When your brain erases a memory, it has to physically dismantle those synaptic connections, break apart protein structures, rearrange atoms back to a less organized state. And the second law tells you exactly what happens when you do that. You release heat. This is not a metaphor. A physicist named Rolf Landauer proved this in 1961. Erasing a single bit of information, just one tiny yes or no, produces a minimum of about 3 times 10 to the negative 21 joules of heat at body temperature, 37 degrees Celsius, or 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit. That is a decimal point, followed by 20 zeros and then a 3. An unimaginably tiny amount of energy. 1 bit? Unnoticeable. But your brain needs to erase billions of synaptic traces every single day. Now imagine trying to erase all of that data at once, while you are wide awake, while your brain is already running hot from processing 11 million bits per second of incoming sensory data. The sudden spike in thermal energy, the massive dump of waste heat from billions of synapses resetting simultaneously, would overwhelm your brain's cooling system. Your neural tissue, with no room to dump the heat fast enough, would start to cook. Not metaphorically, physically. The biological engine would overheat. The exhaust pipe would burst. So your brain needs a different strategy. It needs to shut down the factory floor, lower the temperature, close the intake valves, and run the cleanup slowly, carefully, in controlled batches. It needs sleep. And those bizarre hallucinated movies you see behind your eyelids? Those are the exhaust fumes leaking out of the pipe. But what happens when the pipe gets sealed shut? Well, nature figured that out a long time ago. Here is the thing. If your brain tried to erase all your useless data at once while you were wide awake, the sudden spike in thermal energy from billions of synapses resetting simultaneously would overwhelm your cooling system. The biological engine would overheat and destroy itself. So nature found a brilliantly absurd workaround. It does it slowly. It shuts you down completely. It paralyzes your muscles so you do not thrash around and hurt yourself. It lowers your core body temperature by about 1 to 2 degrees Fahrenheit, roughly half a degree to 1 degree Celsius, to handle the incoming thermal load. It reduces your metabolic rate. It closes the intake valves. And then, in the dark quiet of the night, it starts the delicate physical process of unmixing the cards. It starts breaking apart the chemical bridges of the neural connections you do not need, one synapse at a time, slowly, carefully. like a demolition crew dismantling a building brick by brick instead of dynamiting the whole thing. But here is where it gets bizarre. As it breaks those connections apart, electrical signals misfire. They jump across random circuits. The visual processing center of your brain gets hit with random sparks of electricity from memories being aggressively dismantled. Now your brain is a machine obsessed with causality. It is obsessed with making sense of things. It cannot help itself. So when it gets hit with these random decaying electrical sparks, it tries to stitch them together into a story. You see a giant talking bird flying a spaceship made of cheese. You see your third-grade math teacher riding a bicycle underwater. You see your dead grandmother handing you a telephone that rings in colors. You wake up and you think it is a profound vision. You think the universe is speaking to you. You think your subconscious is trying to tell you something deep and meaningful. But it is not. It is just the visual representation of physical noise. It is the friction of data being erased. It is the exhaust pipe blowing out the smoke. Your dreams are exactly the same thing as the hot air coming out of the back of a refrigerator. The refrigerator has to dump heat outside to keep the inside cold. Your brain has to dump useless data to keep your mind sane and functional. That is all a dream is. Exhaust. Now, I know what you are thinking. That is a nice theory. Beautiful analogy. Steam engines, deck of cards, exhaust pipes. Very poetic. But how do we know this is real? Because nature ran the experiment for us. There is a disease called fatal familial insomnia, FFI, a genetic mutation. A single misfolded protein called a prion attacks the thalamus, the part of your brain that acts as the sleep switch. When this protein destroys the thalamus, the brain loses its ability to sleep. Not partially, completely. Let me show you what happens. The patients are perfectly aware of what is happening to them. That is the cruelest part. Their brains keep absorbing data, keep building chemical bridges, keep generating heat. Every waking second, the neural noise accumulates, but the exhaust pipe is sealed shut. First come the panic attacks. The brain, overwhelmed by unprocessed data, starts misfiring anxiety signals. Then the phobias, irrational, intense, uncontrollable. The noise is building. Then come the hallucinations. And this is the part that should send a chill down your spine. The brain is trying to dream while the patient is awake. It is desperately attempting to run the cleanup process without permission, like an engine trying to vent steam through a welded-shut exhaust pipe. The pressure has nowhere to go. Then dementia. The thermal damage accumulates. Neural circuits that were supposed to be cleaned and recycled are instead burning out permanently. Within months, sometimes as little as 6 months, rarely more than 18, the buildup becomes catastrophic. The brain literally cooks itself from the inside. The temperature regulation fails, the organs follow. They die. Not from lack of rest, from thermodynamic overload. Every single patient, every single time. There is no treatment. There is no cure. Because you cannot cure a violation of the second law of thermodynamics. You can only obey it. Sleep is not a luxury. It is not rest. It is not relaxation. It is a cooling system. Without it, the engine melts. Every night, when your brain shuts down and runs its cleanup protocol, it is performing an act of biological engineering so precise, so essential, that without it, you would be dead within months. That is not poetry. That is physics. And in 2012, scientists actually found the exhaust pipe. A team at the University of Rochester, led by Dr. Maiken Nedergaard, discovered something extraordinary. They called it the glymphatic system. Think of it as the brain's own lymphatic drainage, but for the central nervous system. Here is what happens. When you fall asleep, the cells in your brain physically shrink. They contract by about 60%, opening up channels between them, gaps that barely exist when you are awake. Then cerebrospinal fluid rushes through those channels like water through a sewer system, literally washing away the molecular debris of the day's thinking. Think about that for a second. Your brain has an actual physical plumbing system designed specifically to flush out the waste products of information processing, the beta amyloid proteins, the tau tangles, the same toxic waste that accumulates in Alzheimer's disease. All of it gets swept away while you sleep. The exhaust pipe is not just a metaphor, it is anatomy. And this is why fatal familial insomnia is so devastating. It is not just that the brain cannot delete data. It is that the physical plumbing system cannot flush the toxic debris. The waste accumulates. The channels stay narrow. The fluid cannot flow. The engine drowns in its own exhaust. When you hear someone say, "I will sleep when I am dead," they have the causality exactly backwards. You will be dead because you did not sleep. The glymphatic system needs roughly 7 to 9 hours of downtime to complete a full flush cycle. Every hour you cut short is toxic waste that stays in your brain. That is not a wellness tip. That is thermodynamics. But wait. I can already hear the objection forming in your mind. What about lucid dreams? You know, like in Inception. You are dreaming, but you know you are dreaming. You can fly. You can walk through walls. You can rewrite the entire scene. If dreams are just random sparks from data deletion, how can you possibly be aware during the process? How can you control it? Here is what is actually happening. Your prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for self-awareness, decision-making, and the ability to say, "Wait, this does not make sense," normally shuts down during sleep. That is by design. The demolition crew does not want a supervisor looking over its shoulder. But sometimes, in about 55% of people at least once in their lifetime, the prefrontal cortex partially wakes up during the cleanup. It is like a night security guard who was not supposed to be on shift, wandering through a demolition site, watching the wrecking crew tear down walls. The guard does not control the demolition. The building is still coming down. But the guard can observe it, can walk around, can sometimes nudge a falling beam in a slightly different direction. That is lucid dreaming. Your consciousness peeking through the cracks of a maintenance shutdown. Lucid dreaming is not proof that dreams are meaningful. It is proof that your consciousness is so persistent, so stubborn, that it refuses to fully shut down even during routine maintenance. Feynman would have loved this. The same consciousness that builds telescopes and writes differential equations and argues about quantum mechanics at 3 a.m. is so relentlessly curious that it cannot help peeking at its own demolition crew. Even when every biological system in your body is screaming at it to go back to sleep, it insists on watching. That is not mystical. That is magnificent. Let us push this further. Let us expand this idea, because if you really understand this, if you really see the world this way, everything changes. Let us look at the universe on a larger scale. If everything is just energy and information, if your brain is a thermodynamic engine that must dump waste heat to survive, where does this end? Is your skull the boundary? Or does this go deeper? Think about a black hole. For a long time, we thought black holes just swallowed everything, and that was the end of the story. You throw a rock in, gone. You throw an entire encyclopedia in, gone. You throw a star in, swallowed, crushed, erased from existence. The ultimate trash can. The perfect delete button. But then physicists realized something terrifying. What about the information? If you throw an encyclopedia into a black hole, does the information in those pages vanish from the universe? Every word, every fact, every arrangement of atoms that encoded meaning? Does it just cease to exist? If it does, that violates the deepest rules of quantum mechanics. Information cannot just disappear. It has to go somewhere. That is not a suggestion. That is a law, as fundamental as the second law of thermodynamics that governs your sleeping brain. So the black hole cannot just be a perfect trash can. It must have a temperature. It must jiggle. It must radiate. It must have its own kind of exhaust pipe, leaking information back into the universe, slowly, over unimaginable timescales. Stephen Hawking showed that this is exactly what happens. Black holes do radiate, incredibly slowly, particle by particle, over timescales so vast they make the age of the universe look like a coffee break. This is called Hawking radiation, and it means that even the most extreme objects in the cosmos obey the same thermodynamic rules as your sleeping brain. Let me show you how deep this goes. Every time a star burns hydrogen into helium, it increases the entropy of the universe. Every time a planet spins on its axis, friction converts kinetic energy into heat. Every time you forget a phone number, your brain releases a tiny puff of thermal energy into the blood flowing through your skull. It is all the same process, the same law, the same one-way street. The entire universe is playing this exact same game of thermodynamics. Stars are engines with exhaust pipes. Galaxies are engines with exhaust pipes. Black holes are engines with exhaust pipes. And you, lying in your bed at 3 a.m., dreaming about a talking bird in a cheese spaceship, you are an engine with an exhaust pipe. You are not separate from this cosmic process. You are not watching it from the outside. You are deeply, physically, inescapably embedded in the machinery of the cosmos. Every time the total messiness of the universe increases, every time entropy ticks up by one tiny notch, part of that increase happened inside your skull. Your forgotten memories are now part of the thermal background of the universe. The dream you had last Tuesday and cannot quite remember? Those neural signals dissipated into heat, radiated out through your skull, and are now drifting through space at the speed of light. You are not a passenger. You are a participant in the machinery of the cosmos. And that brings us to the hardest question of all. If everything you just heard is true, if your brain is a thermodynamic engine, if your dreams are exhaust fumes, if your forgotten memories are now drifting through space as waste heat, then what are you? Let us be brutally honest for a moment. You are a ghost driving a meat skeleton made of stardust, riding a wet rock through a cold, dead void at 107,000 kilometers per hour. That is about 67,000 miles per hour, around a giant ball of nuclear fire. And here is the part that really gets under your skin. You have never touched anything, not once, not ever, in your entire life. When you put your hand on a table, the atoms in your fingers do not actually make contact with the atoms in the wood. They get close, incredibly close. But the electrons on the outer shells of those atoms repel each other. It is called electromagnetic repulsion, and it means there is always a gap, an impossibly tiny gap, about 1 angstrom, 1/10,000,000th of a meter, roughly 4/1000,000ths of an inch, but a gap nonetheless. Every handshake you have ever had? Electromagnetic repulsion. Every hug from your mother? Electromagnetic repulsion. Your first kiss. That moment you have replayed in your mind 100 times. That moment you thought was the most intimate, the most connected you have ever felt with another human being. It was just two clouds of electrons pushing against each other across an invisible gap. Your first kiss was not contact. It was electromagnetic repulsion interpreted by a thermodynamic engine as love. Now layer this on top of everything we have discussed. Your memories of that kiss? Physical structures made of proteins and chemical bridges. Structures that your brain will eventually dismantle during sleep, releasing the thermal energy as waste heat into the universe. Your dream about that kiss? The exhaust fumes of that demolition. And the consciousness experiencing all of this? Trapped. Completely, utterly, permanently trapped inside a skull made of calcium and phosphorus. You have never directly experienced anything outside of your own head. Every color you have ever seen, an electrical signal interpreted by your visual cortex. The sky is not actually blue. Your brain just labels certain wavelengths of electromagnetic radiation, around 450 to 495 nanometers, as blue. Every sound you have ever heard? Pressure waves converted into electrical impulses by tiny bones in your ear. The world outside your skull is completely silent. Sound only exists inside your head. You are isolated. Completely isolated. A thermodynamic engine sealed inside a bone box, receiving second-hand electrical reports about a reality it can never directly touch. Your nightmares? Not messages from some dark corner of your psyche, just routine biological maintenance. The engine running its nightly cleanup while your consciousness watches the sparks and panics. Your deepest fears, your most terrifying dreams, the cold sweat at 3 a.m. All of it is just a machine doing scheduled maintenance. And the ghost inside the machine, the you that feels terror, is nothing more than a pattern of electrical activity that will one day dissipate into heat. That is the existential terror. Not that life is meaningless, but that everything you experience, every sensation, every emotion, every moment of connection, is a thermodynamic process happening inside a biological engine that is slowly, inevitably running down. But wait, is it actually depressing? Or is there another way to see this? Think about what I just told you. Your brain is an engine. It runs on the same laws as a steam engine. It absorbs data, burns energy, and dumps waste heat into the universe. Your dreams are exhaust fumes. Your forgotten memories are thermal noise drifting through space. Your deepest emotions are electromagnetic patterns inside a bone box. And yes, one day, the engine stops. The atoms scatter, the patterns dissolve, the heat dissipates into the cosmic background, indistinguishable from the radiation left over from the Big Bang. That is the truth, and I am not going to sugarcoat it. But here is what Feynman understood better than almost anyone who ever lived. The beauty is there anyway. Look at what the universe actually did. Look at the sheer audacity of it. It started with hydrogen. Just hydrogen. The simplest atom. One proton, one electron, nothing else. A vast, featureless cloud of the most boring element in existence. And from that, through billions of years of thermodynamic processes, through stars igniting and exploding, through heavy elements forging in supernovae, through molecules assembling on the surface of a wet rock orbiting a mediocre star. The universe built a machine that dreams. Let that land. Hydrogen does not dream. Helium does not dream. Carbon does not dream. But arrange those atoms in exactly the right configuration. 86 billion neurons, 100 trillion synaptic connections, wrapped in a millimeter-thin layer of cerebrospinal fluid inside a calcium shell. And suddenly, the universe can imagine a giant talking bird flying a spaceship made of cheese. That is not depressing. That is the single most extraordinary thing that has ever happened in the observable cosmos. Yes, your dreams are thermodynamic exhaust. Yes, they are the biological equivalent of smoke coming out of a factory chimney. Yes, they are neural trash being incinerated in the furnace of entropy. But look at what that trash looks like. A sunset you have never seen. A conversation with someone who died 10 years ago. A city that does not exist, built from fragments of cities that do. A feeling, a raw, overwhelming, indescribable feeling that has no name in any language, that only exists for 30 seconds in the middle of the night, and then vanishes into heat. Your dreams are not meaningless because they are thermodynamic exhaust. They are more beautiful because they are thermodynamic exhaust. Because it means the universe, blind, indifferent, governed by nothing but the remorseless arithmetic of entropy, accidentally learned to hallucinate. The exhaust pipe is not just dumping waste. It is painting. Every night, in every skull, on every continent, the same thermodynamic process that powers stars and drives black holes is producing billions of tiny, private, unrepeatable works of art, and then burning them, and then making new ones. That is the beautiful rebellion, not against physics. You cannot rebel against physics. The second law wins. Always. The engine runs down, the cards shuffle, the heat escapes. But while it runs, while the engine is still hot, while the exhaust pipe is still blowing, the smoke makes shapes. And some of those shapes are so achingly, heartbreakingly beautiful that the ghost inside the machine weeps. You are not a passenger in the machinery of the cosmos. You are not a victim of entropy. You are what happens when thermodynamics gets complicated enough to wonder about itself. You are timeless energy that learned to dream. Feynman said it best. He said, "The same thrill, the same awe and mystery comes again and again when we look at any question deeply enough. Tonight, when you close your eyes and the engine starts its nightly cleanup and the sparks begin to fly across your visual cortex, and your brain stitches those sparks into a bizarre, beautiful, impossible movie. Do not look for a message. Just watch the exhaust. It is the most beautiful thing a thermodynamic engine has ever produced." If this changed how you think about your own mind, subscribe. I make one video like this every week, pulling apart the universe and showing you what is really going on underneath. Hit the like button if you want more people to see this. The algorithm is its own kind of thermodynamic engine. It needs a signal to know this matters. And leave a comment. Tell me, what is the strangest dream you have ever had? Now that you know what dreams actually are, what is the most beautiful piece of exhaust your brain has ever produced? I will see you in the next one.